Hello and welcome to another edition of the Ask Dr. Pickel show, where we help people who have chronic health issues and chronic health problems. All right, well, I want to dive right in with this show and talk about Hashimoto's thyroid and the cerebellum. We'll explain what that is here in a second. First of all, let's talk about Hashimoto's. You know, if you don't know a lot about Hashimoto's, or you have Hashimoto's, or even if you have hypothyroidism or low thyroid, watch some of our previous videos regarding that. Just kind of a quick picture of it basically is that in the United States, the biggest cause of low thyroid or hypothyroid is actually a autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And this means that your immune system is attacking your thyroid gland. Some people know they have it because their doctor ran the antibody test. Some people don't know they have it and have it because their doctors never ran the test. Most of the time when a doctor checks your thyroid hormones, they're going to look at your TSH level and your T4, probably your free T4. And if those are off, like your TSH is high, your free T4 is low, they're going to give you thyroid medication, send you on your way. And that's the end of it, except they'll have you recheck it every once in a while and they'll adjust your medication. And that's a lot of times the end of it. Now, if they see or they actually test what are called your TPO or thyroid peroxidase antibodies, or your TG or thyroglobulin antibodies, then they can find out, do you have Hashimoto's, do you not? Because those antibodies will be elevated. And what does that mean? That means, yeah, your immune system is actively attacking your thyroid gland. And then we can say, hey, you probably have Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Now, Hashimoto's, the thing to understand is this isn't really a thyroid problem. It's an immune system problem. So think of it that way. It's an autoimmune condition. My immune system's attacking me, and it doesn't just entail it attacking the thyroid. It actually entails it affecting the gut, actually many areas of the body, but one area that it can affect is an area of the brain, and that's called the cerebellum. The cerebellum lives in the back of the brain. It's kind of like the little mini-me second brain back there. And it does a lot of different things. And in fact, it processes about 90% of the sensory input that comes into our body. Pretty darn important, but it coordinates so many things that we're going to talk about, and talk about how this kind of fits in and how we would find out if your cerebellum's affected if you have Hashimoto's, or even if you don't have Hashimoto's, maybe you have a cerebellum issue and you might want to know, hey, is my cerebellum working good, or is it trying to? So we're going to go over some things that might tell us if it's a problem or not, because definitely that cerebellum is pretty darn important. Well, as the entire brain is important, but again, this is one area that can be really affected. And sometimes patients will have these issues and the doctor won't put two and two together and say, wait a second, that's related to the Hashimoto's. Instead, they'll just send you off to the neurologist and they'll treat it in a totally different manner. So we want to kind of put the two together because it commonly occurs, especially in the research. It's well known that this occurs. It's just not looked at very often in that direction. All right, so let's dive right in here. We have Hashimoto's thyroid and the cerebellum. And again, many people have Hashimoto's thyroid, more than you would think. Now, what would be the clinical symptoms? If you had a cerebellum issue, if your cerebellum was having some problems, what might show up? Well, usually, if you come to my office, one of the questions I'm probably going to ask you is, what's your balance like? Are you very stable? A lot of people will already write down, I'm dizzy a lot. Well, first of all, we've got to define what dizzy means, because some people will say they're dizzy, and that could just mean they feel off balance. Some people say they're dizzy and the room is spinning. So first thing we want to know is balance and stability. All right. So if you just feel, hey, you know, when I'm going down some stairs, I got to hold the rail, I feel off balance. Yeah, that's a problem. Especially if you have to do it regularly, and especially if your balance is, you'll pretty much know if your balance is not not the best, because you really have to hold on to things more than maybe you used to. Now, another side of that is, let's say, vertigo. And this might be more closer to truer dizziness when people say I'm dizzy. So vertigo, though, is a little different. Vertigo can come in two main forms. Actually, there's more forms, but the main ones we'll see are vertigo, where your room is spinning around you, and the direction actually matters. So the room is spinning. Or the other thing that you may note is my body feels like it's moving in space, which we would call more central vertigo. So vertigo can occur as an issue with the cerebellum too. And then the next thing that we'll see with the cerebellum is anxiety with crowded places. We could say it's induced by crowded places. Oh, hey, I don't want. Sorry about that. I can't get my eraser. I want to just make sure that's correct. Okay, so crowded places. So if you go into a, let's say a grocery store, and there's a lot of stimulation around you visually. There's a lot, I mean, you're walking, you're pushing the cart, you've got all this visual stimulation going on. It's your cerebellum that kind of processes where you're at in space, all the things that are moving around you, and people pass by you with their cart. If you're in that situation and you notice, hey, I got to get out of here. My anxiety's going up. I just cannot stand being around a lot of people and a lot of stuff moving around. Pretty much that's going to be a cerebellar issue. All right. Another factor that kind of goes along with this sometimes is nausea with movement. So if you notice, hey, I just got out of my car and that makes me feel nauseated, or I'm walking down a hallway and I feel nauseated, just general movements are causing nausea. Another sign that your cerebellum is most likely a problem here. And then actually another one that relates to that we'll see a lot of patients have is car sickness. Or another one could be motion sickness. You could say that. But if riding in the car, you're like, hey, I need to be the driver. I need to be able to focus on a point, or otherwise I feel sick, or I got to sit in the back seat when people drive so I can't see. Cerebellar issue. Yeah, that's a cerebellum issue. That cerebellum is not able to basically calculate all these things that are going on. A lot of input going on when you're driving. Visual input, especially where your body's at in space. And if the cerebellum can't take that, you're going to get symptoms. It's going to make you feel pretty yucky. Another one that we'll see occur with that is, let's say somebody goes on a cruise, or they go on a boat somewhere and they come back, they get off that boat, and now they all of a sudden have all these dizziness problems. They can't get back their land legs. Let's say it that way. That's actually, there's a diagnosis for that called maldebarkment syndrome. And that is a form of this vertigo type issue, or it's usually, again, a cerebellar type issue. And then another one that can go with this is sound and light sensitivity. Now, if you're sensitive to light and sound, this usually means that your fight or flight system is a little out of control. And again, that will make your pupils stay more dilated than they should be. It can heighten your sense of sound. I mean, when your fight or flight system is activated, you're running from a bear, you're running from something bad. But if it's activated all the time, yeah, you start to notice, hey, I got to wear the sunglasses a lot. Noises just really bother me, even little noises. Yeah, so the cerebellum comes into play, and it's supposed to gate or kind of help tone down that fight or flight system. But if it's not doing its job, yeah, then that sensitivity remains. Okay, so these are probably some of the more common things we'll see with cerebellum symptoms that people will come in and tell me about. And then if we find out, hey, they also have a thyroid issue, hey, we can many times relate the two together. And before we get to the exam findings, here's the interesting thing we'll find is that the antibodies for your thyroid and the antibodies for your cerebellum are very similar. There are some autoimmune conditions that are purely more just the cerebellum, but with Hashimoto's, yeah, these antibodies, they kind of, let's put it this way, the tissue of the cerebellum, very similar to your immune system as the tissue in the thyroid. So not a good thing, but definitely this can create inflammation and problems with that cerebellum. So if you came in and I was going to do an examination of you because of this type of an issue, I'm going to look for certain things. And let's talk about what those things are, because you can definitely look at these at home and say, hey, is this me? Do I have these types of issues? All right. So one of them that we'll just notice right off the bat is usually a wide stance. So if you see a person and they're standing and they always stand with their legs quite a ways apart, they're doing that for balance reasons. Yeah. So if you notice, hey, when I stand, my legs are further than shoulder width apart, then yeah, you probably have a balance issue. Also, if you walk with a wider stance, a wider gait, that's also usually a cerebellar issue. Another thing that we'll see is what we call macrographia. What the heck is that? So macrographia means you write big. So when you have a cerebellum issue, you can't write small. You can't do real detail-oriented work with your fingers and hands. So again, what happens is you start to write bigger, and we should add to that, you'll tend to write messier. Your handwriting won't be that great. And these can all be related to the cerebellum. Okay, another one we're going to see is a test called Romberg's that's positive. So what does this test mean? So this test, you can do this different ways. An easy way is just to stand with your arms down at your sides and just put your feet right next to each other and just stand there. And if you notice, hey, I'm swaying, whoa, that's a cerebellum. Now, sometimes you may, you may have to challenge the cerebellum just a little more. So what you can do is do that same position and close your eyes. And when you close your eyes, that puts a little more pressure on the cerebellum, and you might notice the sway more. If you do this, though, be careful. Have something you can grab onto, because I don't want you falling. Trying this at home, be careful. What do they say on those things? Do not try this at home. Jumping motorcycles and things like that. All right, so with some of these tests, yeah, be careful at home. All right, now another way you can test this too, to put a little more pressure on it, is you could put, it's called a tandem stance. You put one foot in front of the other, so kind of the heel of one foot is touching the toes of the other, and you just stand there with your arms down by your sides. And again, do you sway a lot? Are you able to hold that position? And also, can you do it with your eyes closed? So this is the Romberg's test. If we notice you're swaying a lot with the test, especially in the one with just your feet together and your eyes open, not good. Now, sometimes it takes a little more challenge of the other things to do it, and especially with the eyes closed, and it'll show up a little more. But definitely that Romberg's test is a sign of, especially what's called the midline of the cerebellum having problems there. Another thing we'll see is ataxia. And what does that mean? So ataxia means when you walk, you're kind of all over the place. Have you ever seen someone drunk walking? They're kind of all over the place, especially when the police test them when they're drunk driving. So the thing is ataxia, yeah, that's what that is. And that's one of the reasons why the police do a lot of these types of tests, because alcohol affects the cerebellum. Yeah, it inflames it. It creates a lot of these types of problems. And so the cerebellum decreases in function, and then things like this show up. So if you notice, hey, I'm not drinking, but if somebody saw me walking, it looks like it, yeah, that's your cerebellum. All right. Another one that we'll look at is called a terminal tremor. So what's a terminal tremor? All right. So if I was testing you, I would have you touch your nose and then reach out and you would touch my finger. Now, if you have a terminal tremor, you'll go to touch, I'm trying to do this in the video. If you go out to touch my finger, you're going to go like, whoa. Whenever you you'll come in smooth, but then as you get closer to the point, you're going to go, whoa, and you can't quite touch it, or you finally might. That's a terminal tremor. Or if you go to touch your nose, you'll find out your hand starts shaking and you can't get the point. That's a terminal tremor. Some people, they'll start to take their pencil or their pen and they'll start to write on the paper. As soon as they get that pen closer to the paper, their hand starts to shake. And they're like, what the heck? Terminal tremor, cerebellar issue. Okay. Just thinking if there were some more of those. I think I've got Y-Sandscape, Macrographia. Oh, I know one more here I want to put on. Dysdiadochokinesia. Wow, look at that word. We won't get into where that word's from or anything about it there. It's yeah, but an interesting word. And what does that test mean? What happens with this? Okay, so dysdiadochokinesia is rapid alternating movements. So let's say, can you do that type of thing? Both hands. Coordinated. So look, you got to be able to do that. Or can you put your arms out in front of you and go like this quickly? You're just turning your hands. Now, what you'll find in dysdiadochokinesia, if there's a cerebellum problem, they're kind of all over the place. Can't do it. When they're doing this, they'll kind of go like this. Yeah. So this is a problem too, cerebellum. Now, what's interesting is different tests will show us different areas of the cerebellum. There's kind of what we call the midline cerebellum, the intermediate, and the lateral parts of the cerebellum. And they all have different meanings too, and they play different parts in doing things. But again, it's looking at that cerebellum saying, hey, is this part of this whole Hashimoto's issue? And then as we get the immune system under control, because remember, this is an immune system issue, as we get the immune system under control, stop it from attacking you, does this clear up? Does this get better? As it should. So again, it can all play together here. But so if you have Hashimoto's, yeah, this could be an issue. And especially if you notice that you have these other issues. And then also, this doesn't have to be from Hashimoto's. If you notice, hey, I don't have Hashimoto's, I've been tested, but I've got these symptoms, you may have a cerebellar issue. There's actually another diagnosis called gluten ataxia. We won't get into that completely, but there are some people that when they eat gluten, it causes an attack on their cerebellum. It's actually called gluten ataxia. And so again, this can cause neurological damage from the food you eat, but also that's very common with Hashimoto's. So again, it all can kind of go together too. Okay, so hopefully everybody enjoyed this and got some great information about it. I really hope that everybody will share this information and download it and definitely get it out there, because there's a lot of people who have no idea that this could be part of their Hashimoto's issue, and they need some help. So, all right. Well, have a wonderful day and God bless, and I will see you next time.